Hi everyone, I'm Sandy, and in this video I'm gonna show you, or I'm gonna propose for you some questions you've been asking for your whole life. You know, when the journalists asked Einstein what was the secret that moved you, what was your motivation, he just said curiosity. And we all have it as kids and as adults and teenagers. That's why today in this video I'm gonna answer on some of the questions that you really asked all your life. So let's start with tell me when. I know because according to the analytics of my channel, most of my followers and subscribers are youth. So I'm gonna start with the technology. And let's ask the first question. When was the first plastic made? Have you ever wondered, when did someone just wake up and say, oh, I want to make some plastic? Sounds weird. Plastics are made by a chemical process called polymerization. 19th century chemists understood the making of plastic. The first plastic vinyl chloride was made in 1838, closely followed by styrene in 1839, acrylics in 1843, and polyester in 1847. Whoa, pretty new. However, the vast potential for their use was not understood. Later that century, cheaper substitute manufacturing materials were needed. In 1869, Joan Hyatt discovered celluloid while looking for a substitute for ivory. Oh, that's awesome. This revolutionary material was tough and malleable. It started a wave of chemists developing new synthetic materials. In 1909, Leo Baekeland was responsible for the biggest development when he discovered phenylformaldehyde. This material was cheap to produce and could be molded into any shape. He called it bakelite, and it was the first synthetic material to be mass-produced. The space technology of the late 1960s, among other developments, has been applied by scientists to develop new plastics and other synthetic materials. In the 21st century, we need to conserve our environment, so new biodegradable materials are constantly being sought. Well, this question I really used to ask it for myself a lot. Plastic also is an ideal material for producing grainware, as it's water resistant, air permeable, and shrink resistant, and can be easily wiped down. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's get to the second question. When was clay first used? Clay is believed to have been used to make ceramic objects for at least 15,000 years. Certainly, fragments of clay pots have been found which date back to the Neolithic period, over 10,000 years ago. Oh my god, 10,000 years ago, that's like a lot of years ago. Also, as early as 5,000 years ago, people learned how to make the clay pots stronger and watertight using fire. People soon discovered that by burning clay, its properties changed completely. Whoa. The uses of clay broadened from making small vessels to building materials. Clay-based bricks and tiles were amongst the first composite materials. Egyptian wall paintings of 5,000 years ago show clay workers making such bricks and pots. Oh. The more adept at using clay people became, the more intricate the products they made. Some pottery, which dates back thousands of years, shows a high artistic quality in their production. Examples of this are common from the Far East. Through the ages, the use of clay in construction increased even more. Still today, ceramics is a huge industry worldwide. Well, also ancient brick makers fired bricks in kilns, special ovens, to produce building materials for structures that were intended to last. And that's amazing. Let's ask, have you ever wondered when was the first paper made? The first paper was made about 2,000 years ago in China. I thought it was 7,000 years ago, papyrus. Well, let's learn more. By a man called Tsai Lun. He took the stringy inner bark of the mulberry tree and pounded it in water until it became a mass of flattened threads. He then placed this pulped solution onto a flat tray of fine bamboo strips. The water was allowed to drain through the bamboo, and the threads in the bamboo were left to dry. The dried result was a flat, fibrous material considered to be the very first paper. As with all new discoveries, improvements were gradually made. One of these was to brush starch over the paper to improve. Well, I didn't know about that. The technique of making paper was taken to Russia and the Middle East by Chinese traders, and from there it spread to Europe. Paper making was revolutionary in the spread of knowledge, and mass production began. The first continuous paper-making machine was developed in France by Louis Robert in 1798. At the start of the 19th century, the four Joiner brothers developed the idea further in London. Nowadays, we produce wood-free paper in an attempt to limit the damage to our environment. Well, the Chinese had another secret. They were the only people who knew how to make silk. European traders would make the long journey to take silk back to Europe. Huh? All of these secrets? When were the first books made? The first books were made about 4,000 years ago by the Egyptians, who took flattened layers of papyrus. Oh, yeah, 40,000 years ago, that's more realistic. Stems to make sheets. The books they made were collections of rolled papyrus sheets, very different from a book of today. In the middle of the 5th century, parchment sheepskin replaced papyrus. Parchment sheets were placed on top of one another and bound down one side with leather thongs. But it was in the Middle Ages that books as we know them today evolved. Vellum, calfskin, was made into sheets, and each piece was folded down the middle. 4 vellum sheets made 8 leaves and was considered a section. Unlike parchment, vellum was thick enough to be written on both sides. Finished sections were sewn together down the back fold, the spine, and covered with wooden boards front and back. The boards and spine were then covered with leather. The result was a book similar to that of today. Wow. In about 500 century, monks would spend endless hours on illuminated handwritten books. The work was slow and painstaking, but worthwhile because it was another way to show dedication to God. Wow, When did gold mining begin? That should be super old, because I know many old Egyptians, they used gold. Although the time, even the golden parade is called golden because they actually used gold so much. Although the time cannot be pinpointed exactly, it's widely believed that gold mining extends back about 5,000 years. The first gold was mined in Egypt, which remained the center of gold production until the 1st or 2nd century CE. Egyptian wall paintings show gold mining in its various stages. In those days, gold was panned from water. This was achieved by sifting out the lighter sands in the water to leave the heavier gold particles behind. Well, by 3000 BCE, gold rings were used as a form of payment. With the exception of coins, gold was used only for decorative purposes. Around 2000 BCE, mine shafts were constructed to obtain gold ore found in pockets deep in the ground. The Greeks and Romans became particularly adept at this. Gold standard was a monetary system in which the standard unit of currency is a fixed quantity of gold. It was first put into operation in Great Britain 1821. When were stained glass windows introduced? I love this art. It's like the Coptic and in Islamic religions, they use this art so much on their windows. Historical documents and excavations have discovered that stained glass was around as far back as the 12th century. These are true stained glass windows which tell a pictorial story and are considered the invention of Western Europe. Religious writings dating as far back as 240th century mention the existence of tinted glass and windows of the early Christian basilicas. Stained glass windows of medieval times were basic in their manufacture. The window opening was filled with thin sheets of marble or wood with holes pierced through. Tinted glass was placed in the holes. This was known as a mosaic window. Leading was also used to join pieces of glass. Leading was also used to join pieces of glass together to make attractive patterns in the window. Wow! Circular turrets on medieval castles had very unusual windows. They were very narrow slits because they were built as fortresses. The windows were designed to minimize the chance of being hit by arrows. Well, when was the first airplane flight? The first ever powered, sustained, and controlled aeroplane flight took place at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, USA on December 17, 1903. Orville Wright and his brother Wilbur both designed and built the plane for this historic flight. Orville piloted the first flight in the aircraft, aptly named the Flyer. He traveled 120 feet through the air in 12 seconds. Wilbur managed 175 feet in 12 seconds straight after this. They each had one more attempt. Orville flew 200 feet in 15 seconds before Wilbur recorded the longest flight of the day, traveling 852 feet in 59 seconds. Wow. Concorde is a supersonic airliner. The sonic boom it produces, together with noise and air pollution concerns, has limited the development of such aircraft. Reasonable, because planet Earth is more important. When was the hovercraft invented? The hovercraft was invented in 1955 by the British scientist Christopher Cochrane. He decided to solve a problem that had been baffling scientists for 80 years. In the 1870s, the British engineer John Thornycroft began to design a ship that moved along on a cushion of air to reduce friction between the ship's hull and the water. He was unable to work out how to contain the cushion of air under the boat, but Cockerell solved this by attaching a rubber skirt to the bottom of the boat. This idea worked perfectly and the hovercraft was born. A boat is a pretty large object, yet it floats easily on the surface of water, and this is because the fluid actually holds it up. The liquid offsets the force of gravity. If you want to feel this force, just take a blown up beach ball into water. The water seems to push up the ball. You'll check it, you'll see it. When were nuclear weapons first used? Well, let's come to more modern technology. Nuclear weapons were first used in 1945 at the end of World War II. 2 bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the USA. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed as a result of these 2 bombs, leaving a trail of destruction never seen in war before. This was not only an important turning point in the war, but also a major turning point in history. Nuclear bombs became a new deadly threat with huge destructive consequences. The nuclear age had begun. When did the Chernobyl disaster occur? On 26th April 1986, a serious accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Ukraine. Some technicians in the power station attempted a poorly devised experiment. In doing this, they shut down the reactor's safety system. The reactor continued to be powered, but in a dangerous state. The chain reaction in the core of the reactor led to a massive explosion, and radiation was emitted in huge quantities. Contaminated clouds carried the radiation, not just over parts of Russia, but over the rest of the world. Oh my God. In the 1970s, organizations such as Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace began to campaign on many environmental issues. These included nuclear weapons, destruction of the rainforests, and dumping of toxic waste. When was fire discovered? Fire has been known to man since the earliest times. Archaeologists have found evidence of charcoal and charred remains of bone among stones, dating back thousands of years. It's likely that early men knew how to use fire before they understood how to create it. For example, lightning struck a tree and set it alight. Man would have had the use of the fire and would have been able to keep it going. Cavemen would have noticed sparks created when they trampled on loose stones. It's unlikely, though, that they would have immediately understood that friction of two stones rubbing together creating the sparks. It may have been generations before this idea was put into practice. Almost certainly, the first fire that man experienced would have started by accident or as the result of nature, hence the lightning idea. Coke is a fuel produced by roasting coal in large coke ovens at extremely high temperatures. In these ovens, there is not enough oxygen for the coal to burn. Instead, it's roasted, which removes gases and leaves the almost pure carbon called coke. Whoa. When were matches invented? The very first matches were designed by early men when he had discovered fire. Rubbing two pieces of flint together to create a spark with which to ignite dry leaves is a basic fire lightning creation. Modern matches like those pictured were made possible by the discovery of phosphorus, a substance which catches fire at low temperature. In the 19th century, various forms of matches were designed using phosphorus. Often, strips of wood were tipped with white or yellow phosphorus. However, white and yellow phosphorus is highly flammable and dangerous to use. The first safety matches were made in Sweden in 1844 with the introduction of non-poisonous red phosphorus. Instead of putting all necessary chemicals for ignition on the match head, the red phosphorus was painted on the striking surface of the matchbox. That's called an invention. Stone Age people made fire using a simple wooden stick called a fire drill. The drill was dry wood the drill was turning quickly over a piece of dry wood until it produced enough heat to start the fire. When was Morse code developed? Morse code is a messaging system which uses two kinds of signal, a short one called a dot and a long one called a dash. The signals are sent via telegraphs. A transmitter sends a coded message in long and short bursts of radio waves along a wire. The receiver then translates the dots and dashes into their representative letters, numbers, and words. Samwell Morse, in 1791-1872, was an American engineer who developed the system. He conceived the idea of some sort of communication via telegraph in 1832. After several years of work on the idea, Morse perfected it in 1838. However, at the same time, telegraph lines did not exist across land, so there was nowhere Morse could put his code to use on a practical scale. It was 1843 before the US government allocated a sum of money to construct the telegraph line between Washington and Baltimore. Morse sent the first Morse code message along the lines in 1844. It's so inspiring. When was Braille invented? The Braille system was invented in 1829 by a blind gentleman called Louis Braille. He developed a system which would allow blind people to read and write. It's today one of the most widely used alphabets for the blind people. The Braille system consists of dots. Each letter of the alphabet is represented by a combination of dots. These combinations are punched onto paper so that they appear as raised bumps. A blind person reads the dots by moving their fingers over the bumps, recognizing each letter to spell out the words. There were earlier systems of reading for the blind, even as far back as 1517. Alphabetic letters were engraved onto blocks of wood for the blind to read. This system was good to read by, but the drawback was that the blind could not see how to form the letters when they wanted to write. Semaphore is a means of communicating by using flags. Different flag positions represent different letters and numbers. It was widely used between ships sailing near each other in the days before radio. That's inspiring. When was the first television invented? The television was not invented at one particular time by one particular person. The processes which enable a television to operate were developed over a period of time. In 1875, J.R. Carey made the first basic television system using photoelectric cells. An object was focused through a lens onto a bank of photoelectric cells. Each cell controlled how much electricity would be passed onto a light bulb. Crude outlines of the object then appeared in lights. In 1923, the first practical transmission of pictures over wires was achieved. There was also a great development in television camera technology. By 1945, the television as we know it today had been developed. 21st century technology has brought high-definition digital television and flat-screen interactive television sets with hundreds of satellite channels. With the use of communication satellites, TV programs can be beamed to the most remote parts of the world, including Amazon jungle. Whoa! When was the internet started? That should be recent. The internet was created in 1983. The idea behind the internet came from the US Defense Department, who had a basic version of the internet set up as a secure system for the information. The internet was born from a mainly academic origin, as a framework connecting numerous computer networks together. It has rapidly developed into a very popular commercial medium. By the mid-1990s, millions of computers all around the world were connected on the World Wide Web, WWW. The limits of technology are always changing, and the internet tests the capabilities of modern developments to the full. Modern communications have affected our lives in many ways. Since the 1980s, the mobile phone has proved to be an increasingly popular means of communication. It was publicly introduced in Chicago in 1983 and was a success from the start. Who else can't leave his mobile? My screen time is so big. When was the heyday of canal building? People have used canals to transport heavy goods for thousands of years. It's believed the first canals were built to join together existing rivers to make a transport route. Indeed, the city of Venice in Italy was built on a system of canals rather than roads. 6,000 years ago, the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan was built with an impressive system of canals within it for transport. However, the heyday of canal building was much more recent. The Industrial Revolution was responsible for the upsurge in canal building. There was a huge need during the era for cheap and easy ways to transport goods from factories to port. Horse-drawn canal boats and steam-powered canal boats were faster than carrying cargo by horse-drawn cars along the road. Locks are an essential feature of any canal, which needs to gain or lose height. A lock has gates that can be closed to control the water level in a section of the canal. water is let into or taken from the section, raising or lowering the vessel inside. When was the first metal bridge built? It was the Industrial Revolution, which brought about the introduction of metal bridges. In the past, bridges were constructed of stone and timber, which were available in large quantities. Iron was used because it was much stronger than either wood or stone, and was, on the whole, less expensive to produce. Bridges made from timber or stone became fewer and fewer. The first ever metal bridge was built in England in 1779, the Coalbrookdale Bridge, which spanned the River Severn, was designed by Thomas Pritchard and built by Andrew Darby. This bridge, the first to be built solely of iron, spanned almost 100 feet across the river in an almost perfect semicircular arrangement of cast iron pieces. Wow! The drawbridge originated in medieval Europe as a defensive feature of castles and towns. It was operated by a counterweight and winch. In the late 19th century, drawbridges began to be built specifically to aid navigation, the Tower Bridge, London, being a fine example. When does lightning strike? Well, that's an interesting question. To understand exactly what lightning is, we must recall a fact we know about electricity. We know that things become electrically charged, either positively or negatively. A positive charge has a great attraction for a negative one. As the charge becomes greater, this attraction becomes stronger. A point is finally reached where the strain of being kept apart becomes too great for the charge, and this charge takes place to relieve the strain and make the two bodies electrically equal. This is exactly what happens in the case of lightning. This discharge follows the path which offers the least resistance. That is the reason why lightning often zigzags. Wow! Moist air is only a fair conductor of electricity, which is why lightning often stops when it starts raining. Oh my! That's the news. The electrical nature of the nervous system was discovered after Italian scientist Galvani noticed how frogs' legs twitched when an electrical current was applied to the nerve. Oh my. When was lightning first understood? Ben Franklin, 1706-1790, was an American with many talents. He was a printer, scientist, and politician who played an important part in founding the United States. He discovered the nature of lightning while flying a kite during a thunderstorm. Franklin noticed sparks jumping from a key tied to the end of the wet string. This could very easily have killed him, but it did not. He went on to invent the Lightning Conductor, a strip of copper that is run from the top of a building to the ground in order that lightning can earth itself safely. Lightning is a significant weather hazard and occurs at an average rate of 50 to 100 discharges per second. Lightning rods and metallic conductors can be used to protect a structure by intercepting and diverting the lightning current into the ground as harmlessly as possible. When lightning is likely to occur, people are advised to stay outdoors or in a car away from open doors and windows, and to avoid contact with any electrical appliances or plumbing that might be exposed to the outside environment. A lightning conductor is a metal rod that is placed so that it points upwards above the highest point of a tall building. If lightning does strike the building, it's the conductor, not the building itself, that the sparks hits. That's pretty interesting. Let's check the coming question is, when do we see the spectrum of light? Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton of Cambridge University in England first uncovered the secrets of how light is divided up. We think of ordinary light as being white, but really light is a mixture of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. When sunlight strikes the beveled edge of a mirror, or the edge of a glass prism, or the surface of a soap bubble, we can see the different hues in light. What actually happens is that the white light is broken up into the different wavelengths that are seen by our eyes. These wavelengths form a band of parallel strips, each hue grading into the one next to it. This band is called a spectrum. In a spectrum, the red line is always at one end and the blue and violet lines at the other. Sir Isaac Newton used his discoveries about light to build a new kind of telescope. It used a reflecting mirror instead of glass lenses to magnify images. Have you ever wondered when was the first electrical lamp in use? An American inventor, Thomas A. Edison, invented the first workable electric lamp in 1879. In the late 1800s, electric lamps began to replace gas ones. On October 21, 1879, Edison created a lamp containing a carbonized thread for the filament. The lamp burned steadily for 2 days. The first commercial installation of Edison's lamp was made in May 1880 on the steamship Columbia. In 1881, a New York City factory was lit with Edison's system, and the commercial success of the incandescent lamp was quickly established. Wow. The tubes in modern low-energy bulbs are full of mercury vapor and electronic ballast, through which electricity flows. The mercury vapor gives off light in the ultraviolet ranks, stimulating the phosphorus coating on the inside of the tubes to produce visible lights. When did the canning of food and drink first start? People have been trying for thousands of years to find better ways to preserve food for a long time. The first patent for a tin canister for preserving food was granted in England to Peter Durand in 1810. He got the idea from the canisters in which tea was packed. In America, the name became shortened to tin can, and the industry was called canning. While in England, it's known as tinning. Oh, they always have differences. Like, please people, it's the same. Anyways, the first cannery in the US was one for fish and was started by Ezra Duckett in New York City in 1890. Heinz and Company began producing baked beans in tomato sauce at Richmond, Victoria on October 1st, 1935. To can a food successfully, it must be heated enough to kill the organisms, molds, yeasts, bacteria that may cause fresh food to spoil. The tin can or glass jar must be free from germs and it must be sealed airtight. In 1810, the French chef called Nicolas Appert discovered a way of preserving food by packing food into wide-mouthed bottles. He sealed the bottles and then lowered them into a boiler filled with hot water. A lid was put on so that the bottles would heat in their boiling water bath. Some food, fruit and vegetables in particular, may also be preserved by pickling them, stored in jars. When was yeast first used in baking? I always wonder, like, my chemistry teacher always says, oh, you should have yeast at home. And I was like, why do we even use yeast? And like, when did we first start using yeast in baking? Thousands of years ago, the Egyptians discovered that it was the yeast which made bread rise. And so they were the first people to produce a yeast-raised bread. Yeast is a one-celled plant, so small that it cannot be seen without a microscope to the naked eye. As yeast plants grow and reproduce, they form two substances called enzyme, invertase and zymase. These enzymes help to change starch to sugar and sugar to alcohol, carbon dioxide, and energy. This energy-producing process is called fermentation. The carbon dioxide formed is a gas which many may use in a number of ways, one of which is baking particular bread. Modern bread makers add yeast and sugar to the dough as they make it. The starch and sugar in the bread dough serve as food for the yeast. Carbon dioxide is given off and forms bubbles inside the loaf. Heat from the oven causes the gas to expand. This makes the bread rise even more and more. Finally, the height drives off the carbon dioxide and it leaves a light, dry loaf. The first bread was made in Neolithic times, nearly 12,000 years ago, probably of coarsely crushed grain mixed with water, with the resulting dough probably laid on heated stones and baked by covering with hot ashes. When were fireworks introduced? You may say in Egypt in Ramadan we're all so happy and we use a cannonball as a cannon, as a symbol or a logo, as it's like a firework. Chinese crackers were probably the first fireworks to be made, and this was about 2,000 years ago. They are still used in China and throughout the East to celebrate weddings, birth, and religious festivals. They are also used to scare away evil spirits. It's probable that gunpowder was developed in China because they used potassium nitrate, saltpeter, to cure their meat, and so it was readily available. Fireworks have also been used for centuries in ancient Indian and Siamese ceremonies. The earliest recorded use of gunpowder in England is by the Franciscan monk Roger Bacon, born 1214. He recorded his experiments with a mixture which was very inadequate by today's standards, but was recognizable as gunpowder. His formula contained charcoal and sulfur because there was no natural source of saltpeter available. In January 1606, Parliament in England established November 5 as a day of public thanksgiving. The day known as Guy Fawkes Day is still celebrated with bonfires, fireworks, and the carrying of guys through the street. When was gunpowder first used? Well, it was the Chinese again who first started using gunpowder in warfare. By the year 1232, the Chinese had discovered black powder, gunpowder, and had learned to use it to make explosive bombs as well as propelling forces for rockets. Drawings made in military documents later show powder rockets tied to arrows and spears. When the Mongols laid siege to the city of Kaifeng, the capital of Honan province, the Chinese defenders used weapons that were described as arrows of flying fire. In the same battle, it's reported the defenders dropped from the walls of the city a kind of bomb described as heaven-shaking thunder. Oh my, this should have been so really shaky. In the same century, rockets appeared in Europe. There is indication that the first use was by the Mongols in the Battle of Lignica in 1241. The Arabs are also reported to have used rockets in 1249. It was Guy Fawkes is best known for his efforts to blow up the Parliament building in England in 1605. This became known as the Gunpowder Plot. His plan, however, was failed and he was consequently arrested on 4th November 1605. Well, now let's speak about Rutherford and more about chemistry, science, and technology. When did Rutherford first split the atom? Ernest Rutherford, 1871-1937, was a physicist who studied radioactivity. He found several different forms of radiation and also discovered that elements change as a result of radioactive decay. He received the Nobel Prize for his work. Rutherford went on to discover the nucleus of the atom, and in 1919, he finally succeeded in splitting an atom for the first time. He described the atom as a tiny, dense, positively charged core called nucleus, in which nearly all the mass is concentrated, around which the light, negative constituents called electrons circulate at some distance, much like planets revolving around the sun. Atoms become linked to other atoms by electrical bonds, which work rather like chemical hooks. Some atoms only carry one of these hooks, while others may have many. When was atom structure discovered? Niels Bohr. I think we all studied this at school, but you know, I'm giving you more information, and I'm in love really with this book and all of these articles. I think they're really useful. So Niels Bohr was a Danish physicist. His mark on science and history was worldwide. His professional work and personal beliefs were part of the larger stories of the century. Bohr studied physics at the University of Copenhagen, where he began to work on the problem of the atom structure. Ernest Rutherford had recently suggested the atom had a miniature, dense nucleus surrounded by a cloud of nearly weightless electrons. There were a few problems with the models. However, Bohr proposed adding to the model, and this proved to be a huge leap forward in making theory fit the experimental evidence that other physicists had found over the years. A few inaccuracies remained to be ironed out by others over the next few years, but his essential idea was proved correct. He received the Nobel Prize for this work in 1922, and it's what he is most famous for. Bohr was only 37 at the time and went on to make many other discoveries. Wow. Niels Bohr helped to develop the atomic bomb in 1943. Okay, as I got it, to take a Nobel Prize, you should go study the atom structure. Okay, how do I do it? How do I do it? Who does call me? You know this meme, right? When was the first microscope used? It looked so beautiful. They used to put like some ornaments on their own. I love this. In the 16th century, scientists were starting to look inwards at the secrets of the human body. They were able to use a new instrument to help them, the two-lens microscope, which had been invented in about 1590. The Dutchman Antony van Leeuwenhoek, his name is really complicating, 1632-1723, started by using ground glass lenses to examine the world about him. In the 1670s, he made his first crude microscope with a tiny lens, and this allowed him to be the first person to see the microscopic life, such as bacteria, yeast, and living blood cells. Wow, how lucky should a person be to be the first one to see microscopic life. Wow. During his career, Van Leeuwenhoek, whatever, you know his name, ground a total of 419 lenses, and his microscopes became progressively more effective. The English scientist Robert Hooke used an early microscope such as the one above, you can see it in this picture, to discover the existence of living cells in plants. Some microscopes are so powerful they can magnify the smallest objects many thousands of times. Wow. When was the telescope invented? Galileo is credited with having developed telescopes for astronomical observation in 1609. While the largest of his telescope was only about 120 centimeters long and had an objective diameter of 5 centimeters, it was equipped with an eyepiece that provided an upright image. Galileo used his modest apparatus to explore the valleys and mountains of the moon. Wow. The phases of Venus and the 4 largest satellites, which had never been systematically observed before. The reflecting telescope was developed in 1668 by Newton. He became the first person to use a telescope to see the moons orbiting the planet Jupiter. He also used his theories about gravity to show why the planets orbit the sun. Special solar telescopes have been constructed so that the intensity of the image of the sun or other planet will not damage the observer's eye. Oh my, I'm gonna work at an observatory. When was the CN Tower built? The CN Tower is in Toronto, Canada, is a communications and observation tower. This building was completed in 1976 and at that time was the world's tallest freestanding structure. The 20th century saw an explosion in communications technology. The first radio broadcast was made almost at the beginning of the century when Reginald fastened and transmitted music and words in 1906. By the 1920s, radio provided a major form of entertainment for many people around the world. Then in 1926, a Scottish engineer named John Logie Baird developed the first successful television set. Oh, so tired. Wow, I can't sleep after this fact. Communication satellites are used to carry communications such as radio, televisions, and telephone messages around the world. These satellites are parked in an orbit where they will remain in position over the same part of Earth's surface. Hell, we should see when we're first satellite done. When do we use a modem? Computers that are connected to a telephone line incorporate a device called a modem. It turns signals into a form that can be transmitted along the telephone line. The name modem comes from the term modulator, demodulator. Modem. The device modulates or changes the digital signal from a computer into an analog signal, which is the type of signal that travels along telephone lines. The modem decodes or demodulates the signals it receives back so they can be read by the computer. Some modems are voice band. That means they enable digital terminal equipment to communicate over telephone channels, which are designed around the narrow bandwidth requirements of the human voice. Robots, direct broadcast satellite, Wi-Fi, and mobile phones all use modems to communicate, as do most other wireless services do today. We're done with the part of science and technology, and we may enter about general knowledge. Who would like to know? It's me, I can hear you. Let's rock it. So we can ask, yeah, here we come. When was coffee first brewed? Well, that's interesting. An interesting fact about the use of coffee is that it was first enjoyed without even being brewed. Oh, really? How? That's weird. East African tribes have used the fruit of the coffee tree for centuries as an item of food. They would roast the berries in an open pan or prepare them with animal fat and then eat them. Wow. The first coffee plants probably grew in Kaffa, a province of Ethiopia. This province may have given coffee its name. In the 14th century, Arabian merchants came to Kaffa and became acquainted with the coffee seeds. They then began to cultivate coffee in the Yemen. This is where the people began to brew coffee. The followers of Muhammad were forbidden to drink wine, and coffee was a stimulating beverage that could take place of wine for them. About the middle of the 15th century, the use of coffee as a beverage spread from Yemen to Mecca and from there to Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and other places. There were coffee houses in Cairo as near as 1511. Wow. Coffee was first introduced to Western Europe around 1650. Tea also is another popular beverage. The Chinese are the original and greatest tea drinkers. They have enjoyed tea for more than 4,000 years. It was only about 300 years ago that Europeans first tasted tea. Oh my god, how would they live without tea? Like, most of the Eastern or Asian countries love drinking tea. I love tea. I even prefer tea more than coffee. Let me know in the comments if you prefer tea or coffee. So I did a documentary film before about coins and about currency overall. So now there is another file or another article about when were first coins made. Yeah. The first coins were made in the 7th century BCE by the Lydians. They were a wealthy and powerful people living in Asia Minor. These primitive coins were made of electrum, which is a natural composition of 70% gold and 25% silver. They were about the size and shape of a bean and were known as satyrs or standards. The Greeks saw these coins and appreciated the usefulness of a standard metal money, so they began to make coins too. Gold coins were the most valuable, and next came silver and finally copper. The first coins in America were struck by the English in 1652. They were the New England shillings and were crude coins about the size of a quarter. Really? When was the crossword puzzle invented? The crossword puzzle is both a new thing and not so new thing. Since ancient times, there was a word square. In a word square, the letters spelled the same words horizontally and vertically. The crossword is built on a pattern of black and white squares with different words interlocking across and down. There are numbered definitions given as clues to the world. So, the crossword puzzle added some new things. The very first crossword puzzle was put together by a man called Arthur Wynne. It first appeared in a Sunday supplement of the New York World on December 21st, 1913. It remained as a feature of this newspaper for some time. In 1924, the first book of crossword puzzles appeared. Up until that time, the crossword puzzle had not been very popular, but after this, it became a nationwide craze. Another type of puzzle which is very popular is the jigsaw puzzle. This is it's printed onto a card and then cut into many pieces. These pieces interlock so that you can recreate the picture. I used to love puzzles so much when I was small. Oh, have you ever wondered when was the Taj Mahal built? The story of the Taj Mahal is in fact a sad and beautiful love story. I didn't know it's a love story. 300 years ago, there lived in India an emperor called Shah Jahan. His preferred wife was a beautiful and intelligent woman, whom he loved greatly. Her title was Mumtazi Mahal. It's shortened from Taj Mahal, means pride of the palace. In the year 1630, his beloved wife died. He decided to build her the most beautiful tomb that had ever been seen. It took more than 20,000 men working over a period of 18 years to build the Taj Mahal, indeed one of the most stunning buildings in the world. Oh my God. Minarets or towers rise from each of the four corners of the Taj Mahal. The Taj itself soars another 200 feet into the air. Whoa, I didn't even know this. Oh yeah, so let's come out now to the obsession of most of the people. Oh, what's your zodiac sign? Oh, now I know your character after I've known your zodiac sign. I don't know, I feel like it's a bit of a myth. I'm not sure about that. Everyone has his own opinion. Let me know also your opinion in the comments section below. So let's know who were the people who really suggested the zodiac sign thing. Let's see who did this discrimination. When were the signs of the zodiac recognized? Recognition of the constellations can be traced to early civilizations. When people looked up at the sky at night, they noticed that many of the brightest stars were arranged in a certain pattern or group. The part of the sky through which the sun, moon, and the planets traveled was named the zodiac, meaning circle of living things. I wonder what language is it on. The zodiac was divided into 12 sections, each named after one of the 12 constellations. We know these constellations as Taurus, the Bull, Aries, the Ram, Pisces, the Fish, Aquarius, the Water, Carrier, Capricorn, the Goat, Sagittarius, the Archer, Scorpio, the Scorpion, Libra, the Scales, Virgo, the Virgin, Leo, the Lion, Cancer, the Crab, and Gemini, the Twins. The oldest record of the zodiacal signs as such is a wedge-shaped or cuneiform. horoscope from 419 BC. In addition to the 12 constellations of the zodiac, 36 other constellations were familiar to people of ancient times. These 48 are known as the ancient constellations. Also, I'd like to tell you, FYI, my zodiac sign is Taurus. Yeah, but please don't believe this myth. I'm not a lazy person. No, like literally, I'm not a lazy person, as it's written in most of the zodiac descriptions. Please believe me. When did ballet begin? I always wondered when did it actually begin, you know, because dances and stuff, like why would someone want to choreograph such, it's so beautiful, but it's like actually so hard. Ballet has been the dominant style in Western dance since its development in an independent form in the 17th century. Its characteristic style of movement is still based on the positions and steps developed in the court dances of the 16th and the 17th centuries. The most basic feature of the ballet style is the turned out positions of the legs and feet. The head is nearly always lifted and the arms always, and the arms are held out in extended curves. Okay, let's go back. The body is nearly always held erect apart from controlled arcs in the back or a slight turning of the shoulders. Ballet has, of course, undergone many stylistic alterations. The romantic style of the early to mid-19th century was much softer, not involving so many jumps and turns, than the classical style of the late 19th and early 20th century. Russian ballet is often regarded as the model of the classical school and is a mixture of various styles, including the athleticism of Russian folk dances. Ballet dancers wear special shoes. These shoes have wooden blocks in the toes to enable the dancer to perform many of the complicated moves they make on the tips of the toes. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that ballerinas, they go to school since like 3 years old. Oh, that's so early. But also it's so beautiful. When was the first lighthouse built? The forerunners to the lighthouse were beacon fires kindled on hilltops, the earliest references to which are contained in the Iliad and the Odyssey is 8th century BCE. The first authenticated man-made lighthouse was the Pharos of Alexandria, which stood some 100 meters, about 300 feet high. The Romans erected many lighthouse towers in the course of expanding their empire, and by CE 400, there were some 30 in service from the Black Sea to the Atlantic. These included lighthouses at Boulogne, France, and Dover, England. A fragment of the original Roman lighthouse at Dover still survives. Oh, I want to go see it. Are you coming with me on a tour? Surely whenever I go, I will make the best documentaries and the best videos while there, and also vlogs. So please subscribe and keep continuing. Stay tuned. Early lighthouses had wood fires or roaches burning in the open, sometimes protected by a roof. After the 1st century BCE, candles or oil lamps were used in lanterns with panes of glass or horn. Let's see another question. Oh, when did people start cooking meat? When I was a small kid, I really loved eating. I was really meat lover. I really loved eating meat so much because I saw it from my dad. He really loves meat. Right now, I guess I'm turning vegan, but not really, like, because I drink milk and stuff, so I cannot completely switch. But I don't love meat like before. No one really knows how many thousands of years ago hunter-gatherers started cooking their food, or how they learned that. It was better that way. Before then, they would have had to eat everything they killed or gathered raw. To begin with, meat would simply have been cut into chunks and roasted in the embers of a fire or on stones in a fire pit. Stones from the fire pit could also be thrown into water in a lime pit to boil full. Eventually, people learned to make fire and waterproof pots, constructed of reed and clay, that could be placed on the fire or suspended over it. Cooking nowadays is done either by gas, oil, or electricity on very modern stoves. The modern cook uses many different types of cooking pots, like the saucepan and other pans. So as Easter is really close, and when did the Easter egg tradition begin? Many Easter customs go back to the traditions that existed before Christianity itself. Both Easter and the coming of spring are symbols of new life. The ancient Egyptians and Persians celebrated their spring festivals by painting and eating eggs. This is because they considered the egg as a symbol of fertility and new life. The Christians also adopted the egg as symbolic of new life, the symbol of the resurrection. Another reason for the custom of giving eggs on Easter Sunday as a gift is because in the early days of the church, eggs were forbidden food during Lent. With the ending of the Lent, people were so glad to see and eat eggs again that they made it a tradition to eat them on Easter Sunday. That was interesting. In the legends of ancient Egypt, the rabbit is associated with the moon and became a symbol of a new period of life. The early Christians therefore used the two and link it with Easter. The holiday symbolizes new life. You know, in Azerbaijan, we have a feast called Nowruz feast. In this Nowruz feast, we prepare for spring, we prepare ourselves, and we welcome the springs back and everything like this. So it's actually the same like Easter. Also, we color eggs and then we play some games. So everyone has a boiled egg, a boiled colored egg, and then you set the egg here in your hand like this and you hold it firmly. Then your friends hold another egg but like with its tip looking down like this. So then he's supposed to break down your egg. If your egg is broken, so he gets to get your egg and his egg, and he eats 2 eggs and you stay with no eggs. But if you win, you'll take his egg and you'll eat your egg too. It's a bit complicated and it's nice. Actually, people who have weak eggs starve. But what should I do? Nowadays, there are plastic eggs, so I buy plastic eggs and I keep winning them all, but I can't eat them all, you know? I just love to win, but I don't love to eat all of these eggs. I know that I've been talking for a long time. It's only 1 hour of information. Tell me when, tell me why, tell me who, tell me how, tell me what. So tell me, we have all these questions, and curiosity is the most important in our lives and in our brains and in thinking, in critical thinking and in everything. This is the base of our lives. So if we want to have nice ideology, if we need to have nice critical thinking, if you want to find the answers to all your questions, just watch this video. You may find some answers to some of the questions you were asking. And if not, then write in the comment section below. Maybe you're curious about new questions, or maybe you're curious about new topics we should talk about. So just let them down in the comment section and I'll reply and make a video as soon as possible. Thank you everyone for watching. I've been staying on this video for a long time. I hope this is as informative as possible. And also, one of the most important skills we should learn and speak about, and I'll ask you to reply down if you really want to next video to be about it or not. So please let me know by the voting. The most comments will get likes, or the most comments will appear. I will choose this topic, and this topic should be about presentation skills. Presentation skills are the most important, like, you know, Tesla and Thomas Edison. But when it comes to electricity or light bulbs, you always remember Thomas Edison, because he had extremely nice and quality and good presentation skills that we all have to have. I'm not speaking about we're not all gonna be like anchors on TV shows or hosts, TV hosts, no. But it's important for your daily life, for your work, for your school, for university, for your college, for education, for everything. So if you really like this video, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button also, so you can get all the new videos that I share and post and upload. So thank you so much for staying until now, and also stay tuned and see you on the next video. Sandy, goodbye.